AITA for refusing to let my stepmother weaponize grief to keep control of my father's estate. After my father died, his wife moved fast. She handled the funeral, the paperwork, and the story. She told me there was nothing left to discuss. What she didn't expect was that my dad had documented everything. My father died unexpectedly last year. I'm 31F. We didn't have a dramatic relationship. No big reunions, no estrangements. We just existed in each other's lives in a steady way. Weekly calls where we complained about the same things. Short texts that didn't need emojis or explanations. Inside jokes that never changed. That was our rhythm. He remarried about 5 years ago to a woman I'll call Diane. From the beginning, she wasn't warm, but she wasn't openly cruel either. She was precise, corrective, the kind of person who listens to your story and interrupts to tell you that's not how it happened, even when it absolutely was. She liked facts, but only the ones she approved of. When my dad got sick, Diane stepped in fast. She started organizing appointments, handling communications, deciding who could visit and when. She told me it was better if one person managed the chaos. The way she said it made it clear that person wasn't going to be me. I didn't fight it. I didn't want to argue while my dad was still alive. I told myself I was being mature. Looking back, I think I was just tired. After he died, Diane moved even faster. She took control of the funeral arrangements, the notifications, the paperwork. She didn't ask what I wanted. She told me what had already been done. When I asked questions, she answered them like I was slow. Within days, she told me there was no will, no formal instructions, nothing written. She said my dad believed everything should stay with the spouse and that questioning it would be disrespectful. She actually used the word disgraceful at one point. I didn't argue. I was numb. I was grieving. I didn't have the energy to fact-check my own shock. A few weeks later, once the dust settled a little, I asked for a few personal items. Nothing valuable. Old photos, his watch, a couple of notebooks he always carried around and never let anyone throw away. Diane's response was immediate and sharp. She told me those were marital property now and suggested I focus on memories instead of objects. She said it like she was offering advice, not shutting a door. Something in me snapped, but not loudly. Quietly, I stopped calling. I stopped asking. I stopped engaging. Instead, I started thinking about who my dad actually was. He was methodical to an almost annoying degree. He kept records. He labeled files. He backed things up twice. He didn't just forget to handle things. That wasn't him. I started checking things I already knew. I didn't contact lawyers. I didn't threaten anything. I reached out to someone who used to do administrative side work for him years ago. Not estate-related, not legal, just someone who helped organize documents when my dad got overwhelmed. I didn't ask about inheritance. I asked a simple question. Did my dad ever organize things digitally? The answer was yes. There was a shared folder, one he'd created years earlier, one he'd shared with me once and never revoked access to. I checked. I still had access. Inside were scanned documents, notes, spreadsheets, and a file labeled Final Instructions. It wasn't a traditional will. It was something else entirely. Trust-linked accounts, assets that didn't pass through probate, accounts Diane had never mentioned, accounts that were never supposed to go to her, items that were clearly divided with intention, not emotion. That's when it stopped feeling like confusion and started feeling deliberate. I emailed Diane. I kept it calm. I told her I'd found the accounts and asked why she hadn't disclosed them. Her reply came back fast and dismissive. She said I was confused, that the files were outdated, that grief makes people paranoid and reckless. She told me I was embarrassing myself. I replied that grief doesn't fabricate account numbers. She didn't respond after that. Instead, I started getting messages from extended family. Diane had apparently been talking. She said I was trying to steal from a widow, that I was digging through old files to invent claims, that I was unstable. One relative told me I should be ashamed for harassing her during such a vulnerable time. I snapped and told them to ask themselves why someone confident in the truth needs to smear someone else first. Diane eventually unblocked me just to send a message calling me ungrateful and selfish. She said I did nothing for my dad at the end. I lost it. I told her she didn't get to rewrite history just because she controlled the paperwork. She told me to stop harassing her. I told her hiding assets wasn't grief, it was strategy. She accused me of trying to ruin her life. I told her she ruined her own credibility the second she decided I didn't deserve to know the truth. The yelling wasn't physical. It was messages, emails, calls that went straight to voicemail because I refused to answer while she screamed. She said I was heartless. I said she was calculated. She said my dad would be ashamed of me. I said my dad planned better than she gave him credit for. Update 1. Diane didn't deny anything. She just changed the story until it suited her. She emailed me back the next morning like nothing had happened, saying the documents I found were informal planning materials and not legally binding. She said my dad had been emotionally distant from me toward the end and that she was honoring what he felt. felt, not what he wrote down. She actually used the phrase emotional reality like it was a legal category. That pissed me off immediately. I replied that emotional reality doesn't move money between accounts, doesn't open trusts, and doesn't magically redirect assets that were already assigned. I kept it blunt. No insults, just facts. Her response came back sharper. She said my tone was aggressive and disrespectful. She accused me of circling assets before the body was cold. That sentence sat there on my screen like a slap. I read it 3 times before my hands started shaking. I didn't email back. I called her. She answered on the second ring and didn't even say hello. She launched straight into it, talking over me before I could get a full sentence out. She said I had no idea what it was like to take care of someone full-time, that I dropped in when it was convenient while she gave up her entire life, that I was acting entitled because I thought genetics gave me ownership. I yelled back. I didn't try to keep my voice steady. I told her proximity isn't ownership and caregiving doesn't rewrite instructions. I told her my dad wasn't a confused man scribbling nonsense. He was deliberate, and she knew that. I told her she didn't get to decide when I stopped being his daughter just because it made her position easier. She laughed, not a nervous laugh, a flat one. She said I sounded unhinged and that grief was making me irrational. I told her she didn't sound calm. She sounded scared. That shut her up for half a second. Then she hung up on me. About an hour later, my phone started lighting up. 2 relatives messaged me separately asking why I was harassing a grieving widow. One said Diane was beside herself and that I was being cruel. I replied that if asking about undisclosed accounts counted as harassment, they should ask her why she never mentioned the trust at all. One of them told me to stop being dramatic and let things go. I snapped back that drama doesn't come with account numbers and paperwork. Another relative sent a longer message about how I should be ashamed for attacking someone who had just lost her husband. I told them loss doesn't excuse lying. That's when Diane started posting vague things online. Nothing explicit, just phrases about betrayal, being attacked by people who only show up for money, and how some people reveal who they are when they don't get what they want. People I barely spoke to started viewing my stories. A cousin I hadn't talked to in years unfollowed me. Diane sent one more email that night. She said I was trying to bully her into handing over things that were never meant for me. She said my dad would be heartbroken to see me acting like this. I replied that he'd be more heartbroken to see his instructions treated like optional suggestions. She didn't answer after that. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, like everyone was waiting for me to either back down or explode. I didn't do either. I just stopped responding and let the quiet stretch, knowing she hated not controlling the narrative. Update 2. Diane didn't back off. She pivoted. Instead of answering me directly, she went public in the most indirect way possible. Vague quotes started popping up across her socials about betrayal, greed, and being attacked by people who only show up when there's something to gain. No names, no details, just enough implication that anyone who knew the situation would fill in the blanks themselves. It worked. People I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me asking what was going on. One said they were concerned because Diane told them I was threatening legal action to take her home. Another asked why I was trying to leave her with nothing. That one actually made me laugh out loud. The kind of laugh that comes out sharp and ugly because it's fueled by disbelief. I didn't respond privately at first. I went to the source. She made another post about being exhausted from defending herself against lies. I commented publicly and asked why she forgot to mention the accounts my dad earmarked for me if transparency mattered so much to her. I didn't insult her. I didn't accuse her of anything new. I just asked a question she didn't want visible. The post disappeared within minutes. Then my phone buzzed with a private message from her, paragraphs long and furious. She called me a liar. She said I was twisting things to humiliate her. She accused me of staging some kind of public ambush. I told her she humiliated herself when she assumed I wouldn't check anything she said. She replied that I was obsessed, that I was disrespectful, that I was making her life hell on purpose. I told her she made it hell when she decided silence was safer than honesty. She called me. No greeting, no pause. She was screaming before I could even say her name. She said I was poisoning everyone against her, that people were questioning her integrity because of me. I yelled back that the only thing I exposed was the truth she tried to bury. She shouted that I was ungrateful. I shouted that gratitude doesn't mean blind obedience. She called me a leech, said I'd been waiting my whole life to cash in. I told her she was a thief with better manners and worse excuses. That sent her into another level of rage. She started listing everything she'd done, every sacrifice she claimed to have made, every way she believed she'd earned full control. I told her none none of that entitled her to rewrite someone else's decisions. She screamed that I didn't deserve anything. I screamed back that it wasn't hers to decide. At some point, she said she'd handle this. The call ended after that, abruptly, like she'd reached a conclusion and no longer needed my participation. Update 3. She stopped posting vague quotes. Instead, she went quiet online and loud in private. I found out because people started treating me differently. Messages weren't confrontational at first, just oddly cautious. Someone asked if I was doing okay. Another asked if I had support right now. One person straight up asked if I was seeing someone professionally because Diane was worried about me. That's when I realized what she was doing. She wasn't telling one big lie. She was telling small, tailored ones. One-on-one phone calls, private messages, conversations that couldn't be screenshot or easily compared. She was telling people I was mentally unstable, that grief had hit me hard, that I was spiraling, that she was scared of what I might do next. Someone repeated it back to me almost word for word, thinking they were being helpful. They said Diane told them I was confused, fixated, and not remembering things clearly, that I was reading too much into old files and convincing myself there was something there because I needed someone to blame. I saw red. I contacted Diane again, directly. I asked her why she was telling people I was unstable instead of answering a single question about the accounts. She replied calmly, which somehow made it worse. She said she was protecting herself and that my behavior had become unpredictable. She said she didn't feel safe engaging with me anymore. I told her unpredictable people don't keep receipts. That flipped her tone immediately. She accused me of blackmail, said I was threatening her with information. I asked her where the threat was. I asked her to point to one message where I demanded anything or tried to coerce her. She couldn't answer. She dodged. She said intent mattered more than words. I told her intent doesn't invent accusations. She said I was dead to her, that she was done engaging with someone so cruel. I told her she buried me financially before she ever buried me emotionally. That's when she stopped replying. An hour later, I got a message from someone else entirely. Her adult son. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He came in hot, no greeting, just demands. He wanted to know why I was attacking his mother, why I was causing her stress, why I couldn't just let things go. I told him to ask her why she hid accounts meant for me. He said I was disgusting, said I was tearing his family apart, said I should be ashamed for going after money while everyone else was grieving. I told him to read before defending. I told him grief doesn't cancel facts. I told him if he wanted to protect his mother, he should ask why she felt the need to lie instead of why I noticed. He started yelling in voice messages, long ones, angry ones, calling me selfish, calling me manipulative, saying I was trying to paint his mother as a villain because I needed one. I sent back one message telling him that if the truth makes someone look bad, that's not sabotage, that's exposure. He told me to never contact him again. Update 4. Money is what finally dragged this out of the abstract. Up until now, everything had been accusation, tone, implication. What she said to people, what people said back to me, what she implied without confirming. Then the systems my dad had set up started doing what systems do when someone pokes them wrong. I'll take a quick break here to remind you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments if you're enjoying the story, and tell us if something like this has ever happened to you. Statements landed. Automated notifications triggered, not all at once, but enough that the pattern was obvious. Accounts that had been quiet suddenly weren't. Activity flags, review notices, the kind of digital paper trail that doesn't care about grief narratives or rewritten history. Within hours of that, Diane emailed me, not a rant, not an accusation, an email with bullet points and neutral language asking to discuss distribution logistics. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd denied for weeks, just logistics, as if the last month had been a scheduling misunderstanding. She suggested we split assets fairly to avoid further conflict. I asked her, in writing, what exactly had changed since she told me nothing existed. She replied that things were more complicated than expected and that she was trying to be reasonable. I called her. She answered, already irritated, like my voice itself was an inconvenience. She said she didn't understand why I was being difficult now that she was offering a compromise. I laughed. I didn't plan to. It just came out. A sharp, disbelieving sound. She stopped talking and asked what was funny. I told her the part where she pretended this was generosity instead of damage control. She accused me of enjoying her stress, said I was dragging this out because I wanted to punish her. I told her stress was the natural consequence of hiding things that weren't hers and then getting caught by systems she didn't understand. Her voice went up. She said I had no idea what she'd been through, that she'd given everything to my father father, that she'd held his hand, managed his care, put her life on pause. She said I was punishing her for surviving him. I yelled back that surviving someone doesn't entitle you to erase their decisions. I told her caregiving isn't a receipt you cash in later. I told her love doesn't come with a rewrite clause. She said I was vindictive, said I couldn't stand that she mattered more at the end. I told her she was transparent too late, that calling it fair now didn't undo weeks of pretending I didn't exist. She tried to interrupt me. I talked over her. She raised her voice again and accused me of trying to bleed her dry. I told her if the numbers scared her now, she should have thought about that before she decided silence was safer than honesty. She hung up on me mid-sentence. 10 minutes later, she sent another email saying we should keep communication civil and mediated because my tone was hostile. I replied that tone becomes hostile when facts are ignored long enough. Almost immediately after that, someone else messaged me asking why I was refusing to compromise and dragging this into a fight. I asked them who told them I was refusing anything. They said Diane told them I was demanding everything. I told them she was projecting her panic. The narrative shifted again. Suddenly, I wasn't unstable. I was greedy, vindictive, enjoying the fight. People stopped asking if I was okay and started asking why I couldn't just take a portion and move on. I snapped back harder this time. I told anyone who asked that I wasn't negotiating feelings. I was responding to documents that existed before any of us were arguing. Diane sent one last message that night saying she hoped I was happy with myself. I didn't reply. At this point, she's no longer pretending nothing existed. Update 5. I didn't plan to see her that week. I also didn't plan to hide. It was one of those extended family things that happens whether you opt in or not. Someone's birthday folded into a while everyone's here situation. I showed up expecting awkwardness, not a performance. Diane arrived late and loud. Not immediately about me, but close enough that it landed. She started holding court near the food, talking about how money poisons everything it touches and how grief gets turned into grief. She didn't look at me while she said it, which somehow made it worse. People kept glancing over like they were watching a tennis match before the serve. I ignored it until she said, loudly, that she never imagined she'd be fighting family over numbers. That's when I said if she wanted to give a speech, she should probably include the part where she hid accounts and pretended they didn't exist. The room went quiet in that way that's not silence, just tension sucking the air out. She spun toward me and told me to stop lying. Her voice was sharp, yet performatively calm. I told her lying requires invention, not documentation, and asked if she wanted me to list dates or balances. She told me I was being inappropriate. I told her inappropriate was weaponizing a gathering because she didn't like losing control of the story. Someone stepped between us and asked us both to lower our voices. Diane didn't. She said I was obsessed, that I couldn't let anything go, that I was turning grief into a crusade. I told her obsession looks like quietly moving money and hoping no one notices until it's too late. She snapped back that I didn't know what I was talking about. I told her she'd said that every week and it hadn't made it true yet. Another person told me I should stop. I asked why it was always me who had to stop when she was the one narrating lies out loud. Diane said I was cruel, said I enjoyed humiliating her. I told her humiliation happens when the mask slips, not when someone points at it. She raised her voice again and accused me of tearing the family apart. I yelled back that families don't fracture over honesty. They fracture over secrecy and entitlement. Someone told me I was yelling. I told them I was responding at the volume I was being addressed. Diane grabbed her bag and said she wasn't going to stand there and be attacked. I told her she walked in swinging and didn't get to call it an ambush. She stormed out, saying something about how she hoped everyone could see who I really was. After she left, the room didn't relax. It turned on me instead. I got pulled aside and told I should have stayed quiet, that it wasn't the time or place, that she was emotional, that I should be the bigger person. I asked why being the bigger person always seemed to mean absorbing lies politely. Someone said I was making things harder. I told them she made it hard when she decided silence was a strategy. Later that night, I got messages, some supportive, some disappointed. One said I should apologize for causing a scene. I replied that scenes happen when someone keeps poking until the truth answers back. Diane didn't message me that night. Update 6. Diane tried a different face this week, and it was unsettling how practiced it sounded. It started with a message that didn't accuse me of anything. No legal language, no insults, just a paragraph about missing peace and how exhausting it was to live in constant tension. She said my dad wouldn't want us locked in a power struggle. She said grief had changed both of us, and maybe it was time to remember that we'd both lost someone. I didn't answer. I left it on read. I needed to sit with how carefully neutral it was, how every sentence was designed to sound reasonable without admitting a single concrete thing she'd done. A few hours later, she sent another message, longer this time. She said my silence proved I was choosing resentment over memories. She said I was keeping score instead of honoring a life. She said she was trying to extend an olive branch, and I was slamming the door in her face. That flipped something in me. I replied that memories don't reroute finances and grief doesn't excuse deception. I said if she wanted peace, she shouldn't have started with omissions and hoped they'd stay buried. I told her she didn't get to rewrite events just because the tone was softer now. She called immediately. I answered. She started crying before I could say anything. Loud, gasping sobs, like she wanted the sound to do the work for her. She said she was barely sleeping, that everyone was judging her, that she felt hunted. She said she'd lost her husband, and now she was losing her sense of safety too. I told her crying didn't change the paper trail. She snapped out of it instantly. The tears cut off mid-breath and her voice hardened. She said I was cold, that I'd always been cold, that my dad used to worry I didn't have enough empathy, that he used to say I treated life like a checklist. That made me yell. I told her not to put words in his mouth like props. I told her she didn't get to use his memory as a weapon just because hers was the only one left in the room. I told her she was projecting panic and calling it vulnerability. She started shouting then, said I was destroying her security, said she'd built her future around the assumption that things would be stable, that I was pulling the ground out from under her years later out of spite. I yelled back that stability built on omission isn't stability, it's a gamble. I told her she gambled when she assumed I wouldn't look, when she assumed grief would make me passive, when she assumed I'd accept vague explanations because challenging them was uncomfortable. She called me heartless again, louder this time, like she wanted the word to stick. I told her she was careless, careless with the truth, careless with boundaries, careless enough to think a softer voice would erase earlier choices. She told me I was impossible, that I was ruining everything, that she hoped I was satisfied. I told her satisfaction had nothing to do with it, but consequences did. She hung up. 10 minutes later, I realized she'd blocked me everywhere. Email, phone, social platforms, even the shared cloud folder we'd never discussed, but apparently both still had access to. This time it stayed quiet. No follow-up messages, no third-party concerned outreach, no sudden posts about betrayal or peace or healing, just silence that felt deliberate instead of strategic. I don't know what comes next. I just know the tone changed again, and this one feels final in a different way. Update 7. Everything finally came to a head. Diane sent one last message, this time a mixture of pleading and venom. She said I had destroyed family harmony and implied that I was legally and morally responsible for any fallout. I didn't answer. I forwarded the message to a few relatives who had already seen parts of the dispute just to document it. Hours later, her adult children started messaging me. Not polite questions, full-on accusations. One said I had turned grief into a weapon. Another called me manipulative and cruel. I fired back, referencing the emails and documents proving the accounts had been deliberately hidden. I told them the only manipulation was erasing someone from their father's life and estate. By that afternoon, Diane called me directly. She didn't start with words. She started with crying, then accusing, then yelling. You're ruining everything. You don't care about anyone's feelings. You're a heartless opportunist, she screamed. I yelled over her, saying she had orchestrated this herself, hiding assets, blocking communication, and trying to rewrite my father's intentions. She said I was poisoning everyone against her. I told her she poisoned herself the moment she thought she could hide a legal document and control the narrative. Her son tried to intervene over the phone. He called me a liar. I called him defensive and reckless, a shield for someone trying to cheat me. He yelled that I had no right to involve anyone, and I yelled back that I involved them because she had involved them first with lies and manipulations. The shouting lasted over 15 minutes. Relatives began chiming in via group texts, some picking sides, some demanding peace. I replied to each, calmly cutting through their biases, pointing out evidence, facts, and timelines. Some yelled back in chat, calling me obsessive. I told them obsessive is hiding documents and claiming them as your own. Diane's tone shifted mid-call. She tried guilt, saying I was turning everyone against her while claiming to honor my dad. I yelled that honoring my dad meant respecting his instructions, not bending them to her convenience. She tried insults again. I countered with evidence, calling out every lie she had spread over the past 7 weeks. Finally, she hung up, screaming that I had won, that I had ruined everything. Her calls and messages stopped. For the first time in 8 weeks, the silence was mine. I checked social media. No posts, no stories, nothing. No messages, no blocks, nothing. The end. Diane, you scheming, gatekeeping, gold-digging gremlin. You swooped in, hid Dad's real wishes, smeared Opie as crazy/greedy/unhinged, flipped stories like pancakes, weaponized tears and relatives, then folded the second the automated receipts drop. Absolute clown show. Zero shame. All scam.aita. NTA. Not even a little. You fought for your dad's actual plans against a lying thief in widow's clothing. Queen behavior. Collect every cent. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.